right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here for one of our 2 information sessions on the Town's Sustainability Commission. I'm Tony Mizuko, the Town Manager, for those of you who don't know me. I'm joined here tonight by a couple members of my staff. Paul Helkiotis, who's our Planning and Community Development Director, is right there, and Erin Donnelly, who's been working as a sustainability intern in my office. So what we're going to go through briefly tonight, Erin's going to have done a lot of research for me over the summer on sustainability commissions throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and some of the work that they've been doing and how they're structured. She's going to go through that. Paul Helkiotis is then going to go through some of the work we've had some other interns do as it relates to sustainability action plans, which is ultimately the goal of the Sustainability Commission we want to put in place. In brief, we're looking to put a Sustainability Commission in place. We want them to come up with a Sustainability Action Plan. They're sometimes called climate action plans for the town. And over the course of the next 5 years, it will be sort of a 5-year sustainability strategic plan, if you will. They will plan the work and work the plan, so to speak, for sustainability initiatives in the town. And once we're finished with both presentations, I'll be happy to answer any questions anyone has as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Erin to brief us on some of the work she's been doing this summer.
All right, thank you. As Mr. Mizuko said, my name is Erin Donnelly, and I'm an intern, and I'm excited that you're all here, and hope you can get something out of this. So before I start, I'm just going to briefly go off about the word sustainability. I think since you're here, you probably have a good idea of it, but definitions can't hurt, right? So sustainability is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So obviously the way we're living, the amount of greenhouse gas we're emitting, the amount of plastic we're using is not sustainable. So this commission's kind of there to mitigate our environmental impact. And it's also about improving the quality of life for all Norwood residents. There are 3 pillars: environmental, economic, and social. This commission's obviously going to focus on environmental, and we can like dabble in the social too if there's somebody who's interested in that, but it's mostly going to be environmental. So the Sustainability Commission's purpose is to implement Norwood's sustainability vision and climate action plan. So as Mr. Mizuko just said, the basically first year and second year of the Sustainability Commission's work is going to be related to creating a climate action plan for Norwood, so we can just have measurable goals for the next 5 years and for the next 50 years. And another purpose of the Sustainability Commission is to create a culture of sustainability and resilience to the future. I think resilience is something that a lot of people forget about when we think about climate change, because we always talk about how we can change our actions right now to prevent the effects of climate change, while the impacts of climate change are probably going to happen very soon. So the Sustainability Commission is going to also focus on what we can do to prepare for the future effects of climate change in Norwood, which might involve natural disasters. So the issues of environmental importance that the Commission is going to work on is mostly up to the Commission's members, but the purpose of this presentation is mostly to just give you all an idea of what other towns have been doing to enhance their sustainability. And I've just categorized all other towns' actions into 5 different categories. So I have greenhouse gas emission reduction, I have education, trash recycling, compost, data collection, and green urban planning. So greenhouse gas and energy reduction. Towns and cities across Massachusetts have partnered with Mass Save and Homeworks Energy to install free home LED lights and conduct free home energy assessments for residents. Towns have also offered discounts on more efficient toilet and dishwater systems to save water. They've also switched all municipal lights in buildings and in street lights to LED. We're well on our way to getting all the way to LED in all our buildings. There's some rooms in town hall that aren't LED, I know, and there's some schools that aren't completely LED, but for the most part, we're like pretty much there. Other towns have also added solar panels to school and municipal buildings and worked with local car dealerships to create incentives to buy electric vehicles and fuel-efficient vehicles. Norwood's in a really good position to do that because we have Auto Mile here. And other towns have also passed renewable energy resolutions, which basically means that they have promised to switch to 100% renewable energy within a given time frame, usually either 2030 or 2050. I've talked to some sustainability commission members in other towns who have 100% renewable energy resolutions, and for the most part, they don't think they're going to be able to meet their target in time, but they've said that the target's kind of gotten them moving in a way that they wouldn't have had they not had the renewable energy resolution. So for education programs, other towns in Massachusetts have created walking school buses, which I like to think of as the carpool without the car. So a group of parents walks a group of kids to school every day. This obviously reduces greenhouse gas emissions because they're not driving a car. It also creates a more healthy community. And there are a lot of studies that show that when kids exercise in the morning, they tend to do better in school. So just kind of a win-win situation right there. Other towns have also implemented composting and recycling programs in public schools. As a Norwood High graduate, I know that Norwood has a very good recycling program in public schools, but we don't have a good education program. So there are recycling bins everywhere, but no, at least in my experience, I was never really taught in school how to recycle. And I think that might be a good initiative that the Sustainability Commission could create, because when you teach a 10-year-old how to recycle correctly, they're recycling correctly for another 70 years, and that has exponential benefits. Other towns have also developed programs to educate homeowners on how to limit residential energy use, and that kind of goes hand in hand with the home energy assessments, so that people can know how much energy they're using and they can know how to reduce their energy in their home. Towns have also created committees that work to enhance cultural and historic sustainability, which is a lot like historic preservation, so that in 2100 people can have the documents to kind of understand what was going on in the town in 2019. Other towns have also created sustainable landscaping fairs. I think that's a great opportunity to get people who aren't necessarily interested in sustainability to come out to a sustainability event, because a lot of people like to make their lawns pretty and stuff. Other towns have also created Earth Day education campaigns. I know Norwood has a really great Earth Day campaign, but that's mostly focused on just trash cleanup. So if you could add the educational aspect to that, that would be something really important for Norwood to do. Other towns have also started sustainability book clubs. My favorite sustainability book club name was Trashy Book Club, and they decided to talk all about trash and recycling. Other towns have also instituted water conservation campaigns. So for waste and recycling programs, towns in Massachusetts have organized townwide trash cleanup days, which I know Norwood does on Earth Day, but if we can do that multiple days a year, that'd be even better, because that not only makes Norwood a more beautiful town, but it also prevents the trash that's on the ground from being swept away into the ocean. Other towns have also invested in rainwater barrels for their town and given residents discounts on rainwater barrels. Towns have also passed plastic bag reduction ordinances, and just to kind of riff off on plastic bag reduction ordinances, if the Sustainability Commission in Norwood decides to pass a plastic bag reduction ordinance, it would be a lot more than just writing the document. I know Mr. Mizuka could probably do that in a half hour, but it's more about getting the boots on the ground and convincing local businesses and residents to approve of the plastic bag ban and educating people. Other towns have also increased recycling opportunities in school and municipal buildings. I know I haven't really faced any issues recycling in a school or municipal building, but I'm sure there's a place in Norwood where we could be doing better. Other towns have also worked with local dressmakers to make boomerang bags out of recycled textiles. I know Norwood already has a robust textile recycling program, but I think boomerang bags are kind of a cool way to get the word about sustainability out, because if you have a cool bag that's made out of textiles.
What are boomerang bags?
They're made out of recycled textiles.
Is that the only thing that they are? Is there just a bag made out of textiles?
Yeah, so instead of instead of throwing away your textiles or donating them, especially if they're washcloths or just scraps of clothes that you can be using, you would just make a bag out of them instead, so you can repurpose.
I was just confused by the name.
Yeah, sorry about that. I should have explained more.
When I worked for the town of Adams, we partnered with a group called the Bag Share Project, and they actually took agricultural bags and agricultural feed came in, other materials from farms and agricultural operations, and we made them into bags. But they would make them into bags, they would go different areas, and we actually When we passed the plastic bag ban in Adams, we set the goal of making 8,400 of these bags because there were 8,400 people at Adams, so everyone would have a reusable bag. We probably got to about 3,000, which was way more than we needed. There are still about 100 buildings stuffed with these bags all over the town of Adams. So it was a great marketing campaign. It was a great launch. We would drop in the town hall. People would come and get them. We were nuts to think we needed 8,400. We should have probably called it the 840 bag project, but it was all reusable. We bought grommet machines, and then they just would bring in these agricultural feed bags. You'd pull out the inside, you'd take irrigation tubing, and you'd make a bag out of it. It was pretty cool. We got community groups competing to see who could make 50 bags, who could make 100 bags. It was an interesting project.
Cool. That sounds really interesting. So I'm just going to go off on environmental data collection. Towns in Massachusetts have conducted greenhouse gas inventory reports in municipal buildings, which would be very achievable for Norwood because we already pay electric bills and energy bills. So we could just kind of understand and like crunch the numbers to figure out how much energy we're using. Other towns have also conducted greenhouse gas inventory reports for all businesses in towns and houses and cars and stuff, which is a bit more difficult. I know the towns who've done that have generally hired a separate staff person for that, but still it's a really interesting way to kind of get a more holistic picture of the amount of greenhouse gas individuals emit. Other towns have also published studies about the amount of water the average resident uses and conducted indoor natural gas studies of residential heating systems. The indoor natural gas studies are a lot more common in areas where there are a lot of old buildings because old buildings tend to have inefficient natural gas heating systems. And I also know the city of Berkeley in California just recently issued a ban on natural gas in new homes, which is a really innovative step to limit their emissions. Obviously, I don't think Norwood could do that very soon, but it's definitely interesting to think of what other cities across the country have been doing. Other towns in Massachusetts have created...
I think we have a question.
Oh, hi.
Can you explain why natural gas is bad or what they preferred people to use?
Electric stoves.
Electric, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
And because natural gas emits a little bit more than just like using electric stoves.
Do you know how it compares to oil? Just curious.
I believe natural gas is better than oil.
Okay.
I don't quote me on that because I'm
Okay.
not positive,
Alright,
but
just
I'm
curious.
pretty sure.
Much better on carbon footprint.
Okay.
Gas is better. Electric's best, right?
Yes.
If it comes from a renewable energy source.
Especially if it comes from a renewable energy source, yeah. Other towns in Massachusetts have created renewable energy revolving funds, which basically takes some of the money saved from a specific energy reduction initiative and puts that into a fund to finance more sustainability options in the town. So for example, if Norwood High School got solar panels and reduced its energy bill by say $1 million, a certain percentage of that would go into the revolving fund to pay for other sustainability initiatives in the town.
That's cool.
So green urban planning, towns in Massachusetts have opened urban farms and community gardens. We have a lovely community garden here. I live right next to it. It's great. And other towns have also made green infrastructure plans, which tend to beef up their transportation systems and make bike lanes to kind of discourage people from driving in cars. And other towns have also passed sustainable building policies, which use zoning permits and tax incentives to incentivize new buildings in the area to be built in an energy efficient way by using a lot of natural lighting and thick doors, so like the hot air and cold air stay in, so you don't have to use a lot of AC or heat. Other towns have also conducted neighborhood solar tours, just kind of scoping out roofs that would be good potential for solar panels. I know it's a bit more difficult to get a solar panel in Norwood because since we have our own electric company, they don't buy back the energy that an individual would use from buying a solar panel, which makes it a bit more expensive. So I think the Sustainability Commission could probably work with the Norwood Light to kind of work on that issue and get more solar panels up here. Other towns have also worked with their respective DPWs to plant trees and other plants on town land. I would refer you to Mr. Mizuko if you're more interested in that. I know he has a ton of plans to build pocket parks in Nord, and he actually went to Singapore a few months ago where this photo was taken. And as you can see, there's a lot of green space on regular office buildings. So just trying to create green space wherever to become a more green community. Speaking of green communities, Nord is considering applying for the Massachusetts Green Communities Grant, which would give Norwood funding and technical support to do more sustainability initiatives. In order to get the grant approved and get the funding and support, Nord have to follow 5 criteria. One is getting a survey of municipal energy use and pledging to cut energy use by 20% in 5 years. 2 of the other rules have to do with zoning for renewable energy generation sites like solar panels and wind farms and stuff. Another one has to do with getting the town vehicles to be more fuel efficient, like fire trucks, DPW vans, police cars, etc. And the last one has to do with creating zoning and tax incentives for more sustainable buildings in the town. So that's probably going to be some of the first things that the commission focuses on to try to get this grant application in progress, so we can have some more funds to get to become a more green community. So logistically, what the Sustainability Commission will look like, it'll be composed of about 7 members. Depending on how many applications we get, we're willing to fluctuate. They'll all serve 3-year terms and be appointed by Mr. Mizuko. The terms will be staggered at first, so it's not just after 3 years there has to be a whole new commission. Individual members of the commission will serve as liaisons to the Board of Selectmen, Department of Public Works, and School Committee. There's also going to be a high school representative appointed by the principal of Norwood High every year. It's my opinion that we need young people more involved in sustainability because, frankly, young people are the people who are going to be most affected by the issues of climate change because we will be on this earth for a longer time. So I'm really excited about the high school representative. The commission will also include subcommittees and alternate members. The subcommittees will be led by members of the Sustainability Commission, but they'll include members of the public. So, say Nora leads a subcommittee on transportation, and a bunch of members of the public are on it. But Emily leads a commission on waste and recycling, and a few members of the public are in it. So, in that way, both Nora and Emily can be working on super specific issues and tackling that, whereas the commission as a whole can be working on the bigger picture of sustainability in Nord. It also, subcommittees are also a good way to get the public involved, people who aren't necessarily on the Sustainability Commission.
What's the alternative members?
The alternate members are basically if somebody has, for some extenuating circumstances and has to step down from the commission, an alternate would go up in their place.
People out of town a lot.
Or it's also, you think of it as an associate member where it's somebody else who wants to work for the commission, beyond the commission. We only have those 7 sort of formal bodies, so we can have an unlimited number of associate members that can still be part and do work for the commission. And it allows the town to be able to make sure it's covered under our insurance, make sure that any work that they're doing is covered and bonded, and that we can, expend funds on a project. So it's sort of a hybrid between a formal committee and a volunteer group, and sort of meeting in the middle. So don't think of something like the Planning Board or the Conservation Commission that's going to meet and, they'll have an agenda and they'll have agenda items, but they're not just there to meet and to vote and to sort of, bang the gavel and say, we hereby vote to be more sustainable, and at the end of it, it's actually going to be a working commission, but a little bit more than just a community group. It's the town's official sustainability arm, if you will.
Yeah, well said. So I'm almost done here, but before I'm going to finish, I'm going to give a quick composting plug. There are composting bins, which I know Emily loves, behind the DPW building, and also in the at the recycling center at 370 Winter Street. The ones behind the DPW building are open 24/7. The ones at 370 Winter Street are open from 8 to 1:30 on Saturdays. We're actually in the process of buying new composting bins that are a little bit more accessible. We're really close to doing that, so be on the lookout for that. Composting is a great way to help the environment because your food waste creates methane when it's thrown into a landfill. Also, even more exciting news, the compost pickup company, Black Earth, will be operating in Norwood soon. According to an email I got from them, they said in a few months. So if you're interested, you have in having a company come to pick up your food scraps and eventually give you some compost once a year, you can sign up at the link in there. We can also email that link out. I have it in a flyer, and we can give it out at the next meeting too. You can pre-register free of charge, and before they start operating, they'll give you an email saying, "Are you still interested in this?" But once it's operating, it'll be around $3.80 a week. That number is still subject to change, but it's a really good way to help the environment, especially if you're not interested in creating your own compost, and because I know that's a lot of work and not everybody's interested in that. So really exciting.
What is the town currently doing with the food scraps now?
We're putting them in with the recycled the leaves and other yard scraps at 370 Winter Street, and then those go to an outside facility to be composted.
They do. What's the name of that facility?
I cannot tell you.
So that's kind of funny because we're going a full circle now. The garbage man is coming back for those people who remember the garbage man coming to each home.
Yeah.
Not that old story. I'm not that old,
When I first came to work for the town, we had a garbage contract for the backyard garbage containers.
Yeah.
And they went to a company called South Shore Disposal, and the owner of that company ran a pig farm in Abington. And that's where, that was in the 70s. That continued until the late 70s, when we did the combined collection and got rid of the backyard. Because pig farms were disappearing and nobody was sure what to do.
You probably don't know what we're talking about.
No.
So back in the day, we had basically a hole in the ground with a tank and a cover. And we'd put our organic scraps, which could have been vegetable or meat scraps, in this thing in the ground. And then there was a separate, like, a trash man, but he just came for that stuff, and he'd go around the neighborhood and pick it up, and that went in a different waste stream as the paper type trash.
Oh, so then that's where it would go to the pig farm.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So I can't tell you the rest of the story about the raccoon that used to get into ours and the fate of him, but
Oh, the maggots in there.
It was right there. Something.
That's what happens when there's compost.
So how often would the place come to pick up the compost?
Once a week or once every 2 weeks, depending on your preference. Yeah.
We
So
do have
And you
just
would pay
those.
each week?
yeah, you pay by the week. The rate will be. I think the rate's different if you do every 2 weeks. I'm not entirely sure though.
We do have, the DPW does sell countertop composters, cause like I wouldn't have enough waste at home to compost, so you can get the countertop food scrap composter, do your food scraps in there, and then it goes in the DPW food scrap bin and it gets composted. Cause I know folks especially if you have a small apartment or a small lot, where you just don't have enough gardening to compost enough, the little countertop food scrap bins are a great solution.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where would you take the scraps then?
So there's a drop-off facility at the DPW garage and at the Winter Street landfill on Saturdays, they're open 8:30 to 1.
Yeah.
So you have your own countertop little unit, and you put your food scraps in there, and you can just bring them up to the DPW anytime.
So where's the DPW?
It's Lyman Place. It's the large building right just down over here. And if you pull in the road right over here, you'll see it's a circular container right on the right-hand side as you pull into the DPW yard.
Yeah.
The
Not
Black
circular
Earth will
for
come
long.
to your home, right?
Yes, Black Earth comes to your home. So, yeah, that's the presentation. Thanks for listening. I hope you got something out of it.
We're gonna turn it over to Paul Helkiotis. So great work, Aaron.
thanks, Aaron. That was great.
Thanks.
We did not communicate or coordinate presentations at all, so there's a little bit of overlap. The sustainability movement started about 20 years ago, and it was kind of part of or an offshoot of the smart growth movement. I've been following it for the last 20 years, attending conferences on sustainability, and it's really kind of piqued my interest professionally and personally. It's a difficult concept to understand. It's difficult to wrap your head about it. Sustainability can be applied to many things, and it can apply to most things. It can involve conservation of energy and natural resources, which is the type of things that Amanda was just focusing on. It can be applied to the built environment, to buildings, to roadways, and things like growing your own food locally, sustainably, without having to. The coffee that I drink every morning comes from a long way away in another country, and that's not sustainable. And so that's an example of something that a lot of people, where we get our food and the sources, how it gets here and what it costs to reach us, is important. Decisions that we make today shouldn't limit our options tomorrow, the next 10 or the next 50 years. I didn't look up the definition the way Amanda did, but it pretty much came out about the same. We don't want to, Erin, excuse me. We don't want to make decisions today that limit our options off in the future. We have to be smarter and more deliberate about how we do many things to be sustainable. The biggest challenge about promoting sustainability is about getting people to change their behavior. Last winter, we teamed up with Clark University Masters in Business program with Professor Will O'Brien from the School of Business Management to undertake a sustainability assessment of this building of Town Hall. We had 2 grad students, Rebecca Ralphson and Amanda Lassevier, during their spring semester undertake this project to develop a sustainability action plan for the Town Hall. I have copies here. I was trying to be sustainable, and I just made 10 copies. If you want additional copies, we can provide those, and we'll post it up on the Planning Department's website. The grad students inspected Town Hall top to bottom. They interviewed some of the staff. They looked at the heating and cooling system. They looked at all of our files and boxes of records. They talked about how our space is organized and used here, and about how our energy is used. The recommendations that are contained in the action plan were clear and simple, and divided into 3 tiers. Tier 1, they called the low-hanging fruit, the easy things that we could easily do, that don't cost much money or time or effort. And some of those things the town's obviously already done, like changing out some our lights to LED lights that use less energy. Other things that they recommend are just more weather sealing, composting. We just got in a discussion about that. The second tier involved more costly kinds of recommendations that would take more time and money. They recommended doing an energy audit. And the third tier involved the most costly kinds of things, like replacing the boiler in the building, and having all of our paper records, all of our files scanned digitally and stored in the cloud. And then supposedly we get rid of the paper files that we really want to hold on to in case the computers crash. We then would have more space to utilize for people and meetings and things here at Town Hall. So one of the things that we're going to be asking the Sustainability Committee to look at is looking at these recommendations and to start to implement them. A couple other things that the Planning Department has been involved with related to sustainability. 2 years ago, I applied for a grant from the state on a new program that they were rolling out, the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program. And this program involved bringing in trainers to train municipal officials, business professionals in the town first responders, a group of people from both the public and private sectors to talk about the impacts of climate change and what we should be doing looking ahead to mitigate those impacts. And so they presented a curriculum that was actually developed by the Nature Conservancy. And they went through step by step what the types of impacts of climate change are. And then they broke us up into groups and said, so how do those impacts affect Norwood, and what are the things that we should be most concerned about? And a lot of the discussion focused on, and we don't have to really worry about sea level rise here, the Ponset River doesn't come back up quite this far. But one of the things that we discussed was the impacts of more intense and severe storms and precipitation events, and how those could affect our rivers, our ponds, streams, and our dams. And we talked about ways that we need to make sure that our dams are safe, that there are ways for us to control, to meter out the water before a storm, to make more storage capacity, to make sure that in the event of any kind of public safety risk posed from those dams, that we be able to communicate what those risks are to the residents, including breaking through some communication barriers with residents that might not necessarily speak English. So we talked about a lot of different things during that process, and at the end the state designated Norwood as an MVP community, and they then allowed those communities that have gone through this program to be eligible for action grants. And so the first action grant came around this spring. We got together and we came up with a really kind of creative grant application, which involved the light department has been looking at putting solar on our landfill the way many other communities have done it. And so the idea was to implement a solar field on the landfill. But then the grant application was to set up an array of lithium batteries. Now we're talking about not little batteries, but like 6 tractor trailers of these lithium batteries. The solar power would store the energy in those batteries, and then the light department was going to create a separate circuit to the Savage Center, the senior center. It also houses child care program, and that we used it a couple weeks ago for our cooling center. Well, ironically, we don't have generators there, and we don't have a backup power source for our cooling heating center, our emergency shelters. And so the idea was to take, solar energy, store it, and have that as backup power in the event of an emergency where we might want people to go to that shelter. Unfortunately, the grant application was for a lot of money. We were asking for a lot of money to do this, and the grant was not funded. So we're not going to take that to heart. We're going to, next time the grant round comes around, we'll come up with another idea. We might submit the same grant application, but scale it back a little bit. So we are an MVP community, and we've been involved with that, and we're going to continue. And then the last thing that I just wanted to mention is what was previously discussed, that we are currently working on being designated as a green community. We've completed the amendments to our zoning bylaw that check off that box. We have areas of town zoned for renewable energy research and development and manufacturing. That was one of the things. The town right now doesn't have any zoning that regulates wind turbines or solar. And that's one of the things that I think we need to put on our list. Wind, we're probably not going to get a lot of wind turbines in Norwood. They generally require quite a bit of space. The fall zone for the turbine, you don't want to have one in someone's backyard and have it fall in the event of an emergency. So we probably won't see much wind, but solar certainly is something that we can take advantage of on our rooftops, parking lots, and so forth. And we don't have any zoning that regulates that. And so we'll be looking at proposing some zoning amendments to regulate that particular use and to promote it and encourage it. Tony's got to work on a policy for fuel-efficient vehicles to check off that box. And then the most intensive part of the effort to get designated as a green community is to develop an energy reduction plan. And as I was mentioned a few minutes ago, that plan involves a commitment to reduce our energy usage in town by 20% over the next 5 years. So to begin that process, we have to do an energy inventory, and that energy inventory includes all of our municipal buildings, the electrical use, natural gas use. And so we're in the process of hiring a company that would come out and review all of our energy bills and for gas and electricity, and to develop what our baseline energy use is now. And that's the number that will be used to project what our reduction needs to be over the next 5 years to get to that 20%. It's an ambitious goal, but we're going to do our best to get there. And even if we don't quite make it, at least the effort will bring down the amount of energy use in the town, and that will save us money and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So this is something that, we work on sustainability in different aspects most every day, but it is an ongoing effort, and it's something that we're very interested and committed to working in the future, and we look forward to working with the new Sustainability Committee.
Thank you, Paul. Great work. So just to touch on a couple of things before I'll open it up to questions. As Paul had said, we work on sustainability in a lot of areas of town government, but we don't have any central avenue for sustainability, nor do we have any sort of, I don't want to say we don't have a strategy to what we're doing, but we're just sort of firing on all pistons everywhere we can, and we need to try to house that in a little bit more of a strategic direction. The planning department does some of our sustainability initiatives and works on some items. The DPW and Mark Ryan and Sarah Winthrop, who's here from the DPW, head up a lot of our sustainability initiatives through our recycling program and our waste program. I can tell you that our DPW is probably ahead of the curve of most DPWs in terms of sustainability, but it's not their sole focus. The light department does what they can when they can. Every time we have the opportunity to buy from a solar contract or from a renewable contract, we're always looking at increasing the portion of our portfolio that's renewable. We just jumped into a state program to allow solar in Norwood, and it's not that we didn't allow solar in Norwood, it's just we couldn't offer the same rate discount that other folks would get in private IOUs, we call them the investor-owned utilities, because we can buy the power a lot cheaper somewhere else. So it's very hard for us to say we'll buy power from Paul at 7 cents when I know I can go get it at 4 cents, and I'm just whacking that cost up to everyone else. The state has now come in with a grant program where the state kicks in a little bit of money, we kick in a little bit of money. It's now financially feasible for that to happen, so we're looking to expand that as well. A lot of sustainability commissions started off as energy committees in towns, sometimes 10 or 15 years ago, and they've morphed into climate committees and sustainability committees, because as Paul and Aaron both said, a lot of the low-hanging fruit's been taken care of. A lot of the let's do some LED lights and let's just put in some switches and some timers. And in Norwood, we've done that to the extent that we can in most of our buildings. We've got a couple LED conversions going on this year, and you're always sort of looking at that. Where can we do an LED conversion? Where can we tighten up the buttonhole of a building to make it a little bit more energy efficient? But those low-hanging fruit have largely been taken care of, and they're now very easy through different energy incentives or direct appropriations to take care of. So now we're going to start looking at the bigger issues. Green communities can help that, looking at our fuel systems, looking at our consumption. In terms of vehicles, as it relates to the fuel-efficient vehicle program, the state requires you, as part of the Green Communities program, to buy fuel-efficient vehicles when they're commercially available. And one of the biggest problems we've had for years in Massachusetts, and country, all across the country really, is that there hasn't been a market-available fuel-efficient police vehicle. The DPW is usually generally exempt because they use large equipment, and there aren't solar bulldozers yet, at least to my knowledge, or other large equipment. The light department's actually looked at electric trucks. The problem they run into is when they need to deploy a truck for a couple hours and have its lights flashing and everything to make a repair, the batteries don't last that long, so they end up running out of, the light department runs out of electricity, as funny as it sounds. So they'd like to make that leap when there's that commercially available vehicle that they can actually use and not have a deleterious effect on public safety. But just last year, the Michigan State Police, which rates police pursuit vehicles, has rated a hybrid vehicle as pursuit rated, which means police departments can purchase it and know that it has the power and the energy that they need if they need to get into a pursuit. Assuming we can get into this year's purchase, Chief Brooks and I have already decided that our fleet purchase this year are going to be 4 hybrid vehicles. We generally purchase 4 police vehicles a year on a 4 to 5 year rotation plan. If they work, if we find out that the maintenance costs are at least the same, or if they come down, we're hoping they come down because we're having a fleet maintenance cost issue, Next year, we'll make another purchase, and then the third year, we'll make another purchase, and then year 4, we'll look for additional funds to complete the fleet. So if those vehicles, as they supposedly pursue rated and ready to go for police agencies, if we find after a year they work out, within 5 years, our whole police fleet will be hybrid vehicles. And we'll be able to convert some of our other vehicles in town. Engineering has a few vehicles, DPW has a few non-heavy equipment vehicles, the fire department has a few. We'll be able to convert more of those over to hybrid vehicles. We don't use vehicles for our inspectors like a lot of towns do. That may be something we eventually look at. So we basically, our inspectors will use their private vehicle and we pay them a stipend for using their private vehicle. We may eventually want a fleet vehicle because we know it could be a green vehicle. We might even be able to make those completely electric vehicles, but that's again, we gotta look at the sort of cost benefit of, okay, we're not doing it now, do we buy a new vehicle just to be X more efficient, and is it really worth it to buy a whole vehicle just for that purpose? But we could be looking at right now where I think we have 0 hybrids in our entire townwide fleet. 2 to 5 years from now, we could be looking at a quarter or a third of it being hybrids and more as they become commercially available. We did recently plant 46 apple trees at the town community garden, so that's sort of our first little town orchard. They'll take about 5 or 6 years before they bear any fruit. We haven't decided exactly what we're going to do with the fruit yet. We're kind of hoping it's just an open sort of, apple per resident. We may pick some of them and give them to a food pantry, but we're really just looking at ways that we can be a little bit more restorative in our land use as well. And as Paul said, the challenge with sustainability is really about changing behaviors. So we can come up with great ideas, but it's changing those behaviors and it's changing those concepts that folks have and making sure that there's an understanding in the community of why it's beneficial to us. I mean, it's a catch-22 for the town, right? We make money off electricity, but we don't want to waste electricity. We technically make money off water, but if we can reduce how much water we use overall, our share of the MWRA, which is our water provider, drops down, and that actually saves the ratepayers money too. So there's now, and as it relates to trash and recycling, we're on the verge of a crisis with trash and recycling costs in the next couple of years. Every community in the country is going to face that. So we're hitting a point in Massachusetts and in the country as a whole where there's always been an environmental imperative to focus on sustainability. We're very quickly coming up on a serious economic imperative to focus on sustainability and being as sustainable as we can. A lot of the different initiatives that we talked about that we look into incentivizing permits for LEED construction or for green roofs or for vertical green space. Can we look into how we go about incentivizing reducing water usage, reducing electricity usage? I was happy to find out that Berkeley had banned natural gas. I wish we were Berkeley and we could just do crazy things like pass an ordinance and ban natural gas. It would probably take us 100 years to be able to do it. But if we could eventually convert more homes in town over to electricity, we know that a certain portion of our portfolio is green, it is renewable, and is carbon-free. And only electricity will ever be carbon-free. So we'd like to look at initiatives like that. But what we need is a commission that's sort of being strategic, that understands what we're doing, that is willing to spend the time to get that message out there to the public, and also can say, hey, you know what, this is a great idea to convert everyone from natural gas to electricity, but it's going to take 60 years and $200 billion, so maybe let's focus on something here. Not that we just want to focus on what we can do, what's in front of us, but sort of strategically, what can we reasonably get done in the next 5 years, and how do we want to do that? Complete that plan over the next 5 years, and then we'll move on to the next 5-year plan and just continue going in cycles from there. And part of the responsibility of the Sustainability Commission, and incidentally, we have a job description, if you will, for the Sustainability Commission. It's right up on the town's webpage, right when you pull up front of the webpage, there's some information there, and it actually says Sustainability Commission job description. It's also, there's a page where we have our other boards and committees with their different websites for the boards and committees. It's on there as well. There's not much there other than the job description, and we'll get this presentation up there as well. We're repeating this session on Tuesday, so we can eventually get the video up for it as well. But that's right on there, so go and take a look, because part of the process is going to be that selling point to the public and making sure the average member of the public understands what the town's doing and what the benefit is. Just last week, I believe the board received an email on a litany of issues, and one of them is somebody was disgusted that the town manager wanted to make the community greener. So there's different opinions out there on sustainability and the value of going green and being any greener than we are. Personally, disgusted is actually a nice word when people are usually mad at the town manager, so I said that's practically a compliment. But so there's a lot of community engagement that needs to go on, and the example I always use is a plastic bag ban, and Aaron mentioned it as well. A lot of towns have done them. The state's actually probably moving forward with a statewide ban in the next year or two. The mechanics of something like that are not difficult, but it's working with the stakeholders and that time to work with people in the community that you need to do. I worked for the town of Adams, and somebody just threw on a warrant at town meeting, and wanted to just kind of railroad it through, and town meeting said, we haven't looked at this, we haven't heard about this. There was a reference to the police chief enforcing the bag ban, and our police chief stands up at town meeting and says, so with everything else I gotta do, can somebody tell me now that I'm supposed to, check if the bag is 3 micrometers or not? So we sent it to committee. I had like a landfill committee of sorts up there that I don't know why they took it on, but they did, and they did great work with it. They met with the store owners, they met with the businesses in town, in particular the grocery stores, the small businesses. They held public information sessions, they took public comment, spent about a year where this is exclusively what this 5 or 6 people board did. And then the next year when it came up at town meeting, there were 3 questions, and then it passed with, I think, 2 no votes. And then 6 months later, the bag ban went into effect. The selectman chair at the time was interviewed by the press, and he goes, I walked into the big Y, and nobody self-combusted. The store wasn't on fire, the world didn't end, most people just shrugged their shoulders and went about it. But we had done all of that effort leading up to it, including, as I said, the 8,400 bag challenge, in terms of getting people involved in bags, and that helped market the bag ban and what we were trying to do and what the benefit was as well. So all of those things contributed to a successful program and something successful in the community where there was buy-in. A town, it's somewhere in the Metro West area recently, a year ago passed the bag ban, and people were trying to revoke the bag ban that they had already passed, and that's usually an indication that that community consensus hadn't been built, and that they hadn't gotten that message out there, that somebody just tried to say, this is great, let's do and run and get it through real quick, and then there's a lot of pushback on the other side. So there's a real need for folks interested in being on the Sustainability Commission to be willing to have that message with the public and interact with stakeholders for whatever the issue is, and members of the public in general. So, that being said, I think that's all I have. I'm more than happy to answer any questions anyone has about anything. I'm not an expert on sustainability by any means, but I'll give it a shot. Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
I've been listening to a lot of the ideas that you have. A lot of that's to do with the environment, planning for the future, things like that. But at the same time, there's a gigantic development of new people moving into this town. Now, I haven't heard anything in the whole conversation about how you're going to include population growth in the sustainable plan for this town. Because who knows, we may become a city. I don't know, but I'm just saying, have you considered population growth as part of the sustainability your strategic plan?
So we're talking about how the community can be more sustainable, and I would never say that we would want to limit population growth, because what we're doing is we're never limiting population growth. We would basically be trying to say not here in Norwood, but they can go somewhere else. The state also, we have to compete, we have competing issues. The state has a housing crisis. Norwood's becoming quickly unaffordable. So if we completely say no more housing in town, all that's going to do is cause the values to go skyrocketing through the roof, and there's a benefit to home values going up, but you don't want them going up too quickly. We're fully built out as a community. What we're going to see, because of the housing pressures in the greater Boston market, you're going to see more development coming into town. To the extent that you can legally limit development, it's tough. We're fully built out. You take a town like Dover, and 50 or 60 years ago, they said, we want acre lots, and that's it. Norwood's been fully built out for 100 years, so you're probably still going to see continued growth, but remember, we can't stop population growth.
I'm not saying so.
No, you're right, but anything we did where we said we don't want more growth, we're not going to be successful with that. But if 5 years ago, we had a higher energy standard for construction in town, if we had said any multifamily buildings constructed over 5 units have to meet a different standard for energy efficiency, there's a lot of energy that's going to be wasted up at Avalon Bay and up at Upland Woods that could have been a lot more efficient. I mean, if we could have required if we had our own local plumbing code, and we have to make sure we're following state statute, which can be challenging, but if we had a stricter water conservation standard than what's required in the code, there's 400 units between those 2 buildings, flushing those toilets every day. How many thousands of gallons a day could we have saved if we had been a little bit more proactive in looking at something like that? The same thing with any of our conservation measures. If we had said, we'll refund part of your building permit if you build a green roof, or if you build to a LEED standard, or maybe we say, look, at large construction over a certain size has to be built to a LEED standard, and there may be a legal challenge to that. The courts may not want to do it. We'd have to sit down with developers and real estate agents, but if we had done it a few years ago, we would have been in a better position with more environmentally friendly and more net zero buildings. And communities are always changing, they're always growing, there's always something happening, so the sooner we act, we know that for the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, we'll be there.
So,
I'd like to respond as well.
Yeah.
From the planner's perspective. We've heard about sprawl, about suburban sprawl. You don't have to drive far to one of our neighboring communities that has 1 or 2 acre zoning, 1 house per an acre or 2 acre. That has consumed the majority of the land in eastern Massachusetts. The planners saw this trend that was going on, understood that it was not sustainable, and so the change in philosophy was to channel new growth. Because we're not about no growth or zero growth. We understand that our population is going to continue to grow, but we want to channel that growth into existing town centers in places where we have the infrastructure capacity to handle that additional growth. And so that translates into more dense housing, multifamily housing, close to our town center. And those projects that have recently been approved and that are under construction now fit that bill. I will say that, we understand that under 40B, the Affordable Housing Act, that developers are allowed to bypass local zoning. And I look at the 40B developments that we have in town and say that they are out of scale, they're too tall, and they don't fit in with the architectural fabric of our community. But having said that, it does achieve those other goals of channeling growth to our existing town center where we have adequate water, sewer, and road capacity to handle that growth in the future. And so this has been the mantra of planners over the last 10 or 15 years, that we can't continue to grow 1 house per acre, half-acre lots, that we need to channel it. It's been something that we've tried to communicate with the public, and a lot of people are okay with it, but if it's anywhere near their neighborhood, they're not. And so that's been the problem and the controversy that we've been dealing with over the last 20 years or so.
It's interesting, our population in Norwood is actually, it's up slightly, but it's largely flat. Bernie, how long have we been at 29, 30,000 people?
1970, we were at 30,815, I remember the number. And we dropped slightly as family size dropped.
Sure. So,
But now we're back up.
which, not that we're here to talk about housing, but I find it fascinating that houses are getting bigger, but families are getting smaller. I will never understand that, but now it's, you're gonna build a 3,000 square foot house as a new house for 2 people and 1 kid, but neither here nor there. But to the original point, the population is part of that, looking at the growth is part of that, but what can we do to be more sustainable? We've been here 150 years, how can we be more sustainable 150 years going out?
And to make that population, the new population who's coming into Norwood, more sustainable,
Exactly.
especially, and I think that kind of starts with education initiatives.
Yeah, exactly.
Like when you
Yep.
start, when you move in, having a packet that tells you what to recycle and how to recycle it and how to reduce your waste.
Exactly.
Just working on initiatives like that.
Yeah.
Quick perfect example is the
Yep.
stretch energy code, which is almost the same code as the state has, but it's a slightly more strict energy code. If we had just done it a few years ago, and it's always easy in hindsight to say, well, if we'd just done this a few years ago, but if we'd gotten in before the last 2 apartment complexes, they would have been that much more energy efficient. And again, they're easy to pick on because they're big and they're ugly and we can all see them. But what we can get done in the next 5 years, we know that 10 or 20 years after that, we'll be in a better position. Because we know that doing nothing isn't an option, and if we did choose to do nothing, we know exactly where we'll be in 5 years, which is right where we are. And that economic portion of the environmental crisis is gonna really start to hit. Trash costs, when our current contract expires, are gonna go through the roof. I mean, there's almost a point where you could foresee in 10 or 15 years, you have to start paying a trash bill like it's a utility bill. Like you've got to budget it and say, okay, do I have enough money for electric, I have enough for heat, my rent, and my trash bill, because the costs are just gonna go through the roof. Question?
Have you hired or do you plan to hire a sustainability manager?
We may at some point in the future. What we are doing is we're gonna share an energy manager with the town of Sharon, starting in the next couple of months. And, energy managers sometimes morph into sustainability managers. If I hired a sustainability manager tomorrow, I wouldn't have enough of a portfolio for them. I need to pay that person a decent salary and have them come to work and have 40 hours worth of administrative work to do. We're starting with an energy manager because we have a sort of decentralized facilities process in Norwood. So this person's gonna be shared with the town of Sharon. They'll spend the next year or 2 really getting our energy programs and our energy efficiency in our buildings up to par, up to speed. What we then want to do is share that position with a couple other towns, because once you get a good energy manager in for a couple of years, you don't necessarily need them 3 or 4 days a week, but you want to keep a person on a day a week. So our goal is to then share it, which is just my way of also mitigating the cost. We may at some point in the future have a sustainability coordinator, or we're looking at, as people retire, we're always replacing positions with different job descriptions. I know we've talked about the next time there's a retirement in the planning department, we're probably going to want to have somebody that is part conservation agent, part environmental planner. They would be able to look at some of those initiatives. We also, we used to have a position in the DPW that was a recycling coordinator. We may look at either bringing that back, or maybe at some point we have a part energy manager, part recycling manager. So we could get there, we're just not ready yet. And what I don't want to do is just create a position and hire somebody and invest all those resources and they'll do good work over the next year or two, but they won't really do great work because it's not ready to go. So part of, if we can get a good commission up and running, get a good plan running, my office will provide staff support along with the planning department to the Sustainability Commission. Hopefully in a year or 2 or 3, we'll see, hey, there's a need for additional staff capacity here.
So would there be some reporting back and forth between the energy manager and the commission?
Oh, I think, absolutely, I think it'd be
On a
important for him to
regular
update them,
basis.
as part of the green communities, if nothing else, to just say, hey, look at, in the last 6 months, this is what we've done, and some of that is gonna be simple. Some of it's taking a big look at just, when you think of energy usage, we all think of just shut a light off, and sometimes that's simple. Sometimes it's basic facility maintenance, where we use, I think, 140 different light bulbs at the high school. So maybe we can look at having not so many light bulbs at the high school. This building's an exception because it's 90 years old, so as long as things work, we're usually happy with it. But you need somebody to always come in and sort of be looking at your energy usage schedules and your building schedules, and really evaluating your HVAC systems. And that's, I mean, we always like to think of lights and LED lights because they're quick and easy, but energy usage of buildings is a
So an
is a critical
energy
issue.
manager, not a sustainability manager?
Correct,
Yep.
because that's what we need now, that's where sort of the work is. In a couple of years, that'll be a quarter-time position, a part-time, if that, and again, shared with a few other communities, we'd be looking to merge into other activities with that position.
Yeah.
So it's just about starting and scaling things out.
Was the recycling coordinator just a job to set up systems, or she's gone?
Yeah, the position was not filled a couple years ago. There were some budget challenges. It's funny, with recycling, it depends on the ebb and flow of what's going on. At certain times, you could have a recycling coordinator, and they're just sort of getting information out there and trying to encourage you to recycle. Other times, right now, where we're facing a contamination issue, I could use 5 recycling coordinators to go out and do recycling audits and pull people's recycling. I mean, the stuff people throw away is absurd that they think they can recycle. It's well-intentioned, but we've done recycling audits and people throw a deflated basketball in there, they throw an old cat bed in there, they throw an old bike pump in there, and I think they think there's a little recycling elf somewhere saying, oh, here's your used basketball, let me go and find a way to reuse it. So it's always frustrating because we tell people you need to be better about your recycling, and then what you get is somebody really, really scrubs out that spaghetti jar before they put it in the recycling bin, and then other people say, oh, all right, I gotta be more sustainable, let me just throw this in there, and oh, here's a printer, let me throw it in there. I mean, it gets tough. So the need for a position like that ebbs and flows. What we could see down the road is sort of a hybrid position where that's part of their responsibility, and they're also looking at a lot of our other sustainability initiatives and some of our environmental planning as well.
As a follow-up to the energy management position, Paul, you said you're working with a firm now to create baselines?
We've just received a list of vendors, and we're in the process of getting their qualifications and deciding who to hire to do this audit. That's going to be part of our requirement to get designated as a green community.
We're also looking at the possibility, the state has a process, it's called the 25A process of bringing on sort of a comprehensive energy services provider. Well, sometimes that ends up costing more money, but what it does is it gives us one company that we can work with for a lot of our energy programs, both at the sort of the facility level scale, where all right, we need to retrofit this building with X type of lights, and hey, we want to put in a parking solar canopy at this lot, you know, with some of the companies that do it. I know Amoresco is one of them. Not Time Bond, but there's a company like Time Bond that does it, that you can just say to them, hey, this is what we want to do, and they're sort of that comprehensive provider. We still need an on-the-ground energy manager to be able to work with them, so those are 2 options we're looking at. We're getting some grant money to go through the N-Grid audits and to do that, but it's trying to pull all that data together and then have the energy manager be the one who can be our facilities point person for a lot of the energy work that we want to do. And that'll translate up into some of the sustainability that we want to do community-wide. I mean, one of the challenges is it's hard for me to say, hey everyone, you've got to be really sustainable. I haven't changed the LED lights out in Town Hall in 30 years, but all of you should as well. And hey, we should all use less restrictive water, hoses or whatever, or showers, when God only knows what town buildings have. So we've got to sort of get our own house in order as well. Yeah, here and then we'll go there.
Who was first?
You were first.
Okay. So like, there are different like resource saving things. Like I saw a toilet that like the sink was on top of the toilet, so that when you washed your hands, the water went into the tank, so you could flush your toilet with that water. Things like that, where you like save resources. Are you guys looking into things that are like new ways of doing things that would use less resources to install in your public buildings?
Absolutely. So we're looking at that for, and that's stuff that green communities can cover, and some of that stuff we can do on our own. So we want to do that on a micro level at town buildings, but we want something as an example the Sustainability Commission can look into is how do we translate that over the whole town? So can we go through a process, and it's long and complicated, where every building built after X day will use less water than if we hadn't done that? And then you have the problem of, well, how do you convert every home that's in town? We simply can't buy every home in town a brand new toilet. That would be millions of dollars. But is there a way to do it? Can we incentivize that? Do we do it through the plumbing permit process? Does the town meeting put up an appropriation and say, hey, every year we're gonna be able to fund 50 of these, or 100 of these, or 200 of these? The idea being, how can we reduce the overall water usage? And then how do we track that? Do we see, are we making an impact? Do we, in 20 years, have we given out 5,000 or 50,000 low flush toilets or low flush shower heads? But we wanna look at those things both on a local level, but how do we do it for the town, and how do we get there? And that's where a lot of the work at the commission comes in. It's very easy to say, let's just make everyone use a low capacity shower head, which I know some people hate, but it's a lot harder to actually figure out, well, how do we get that into all these homes? How do we pay for that? And how do we convince the public that, hey, I should raise your water rates $1 over here to reduce somebody's usage over here? So that those are good discussions to have, but there's a lot of work and teasing in that process to get things like that to work. But that's some of the exciting stuff. I think we're probably slightly behind the curve of municipalities in looking at our overall sustainability portfolio, but as unfortunate as it is in Massachusetts, the wealthier communities, things tend to have easier. They can just hire whoever they want, as many people as they want, and spend all the money. When you're sort of more of a middle-class community like Norwell, we've got to be a little bit more cautious with our resources than a Weston or a Wellesley that just can spend money on whatever they want. But some of the things we're tentatively looking at 5 years from now, I think we can not only bridge that gap, but be sort of a little bit on the other edge in terms of leading other cities and towns.
And I know in my presentation I talked about Sharon. Sharon actually, their Sustainability Commission worked with a low-rise toilet company to get them heavily discounted for their town, so that worked well to get their water usage down. So just like working with other vendors is definitely something we're looking into.
Question?
Yes, is this Sustainability Commission like a standalone commission, or are they like a subcommittee or something of Concom or the planning board or something?
No, it's so under state statute, it's established as an advisory committee of the general manager. There's sort of two different ways we create committees. You're either an advisory board to a manager or to a selectman, or you can go forward and put forward a bylaw at town meetings so the town adopts a bylaw. The challenge is if there's no statutory authority behind that, like a conservation commission or a historic commission, there's no real benefit to doing that other than it's some additional paperwork. So like our trails committee is technically an advisory committee, but they function just like any other town or board. They meet, they get their work done. The benefit to doing it this way as opposed to having just say a standalone, I know we have a lot of different sustainability groups in town, which is great, we still need them, is that this is not only the town's official arm, but it means we're sort of covered under our insurance, which is always my concern. We're covered if we wanted to make an appropriation. If we needed to direct resources to it, we have that ability to do so. So it's much more difficult for me to say, okay, we've got Bob's sustainability company over here, and they really want to look into this process. Can I give them $4,000 to do some research? That's a lot more complicated and challenging. When it's the town's actual arm, it makes that a lot easier, a lot cleaner. Questions? Yeah.
Is that stomach? I'm in the front, so it's hard to tell if you're.
No, yeah, it's up to you.
Okay. So you mentioned putting more plants and green spaces. Is it like? Like I'm just trying to like think about how the green space happen. Like some people have like different things like there are some communities where they like try to plant a lot of like edible plants so that they can have like foraging groups, and then that reduces the amount of like food that needs to be taken into the community. Or is it just like or is it like a like permaculture thing where you're trying to like create like a self-sustaining little ecosystem, or is it just like a thing to like absorb the oxygen or to like be pretty and make people feel more naturey? I don't know. I just want to know your like.
So the answer would be it's a combination of two things. One is all of the above. We want to do as much as we can, where we can, and when we can. I mean, I have no problem planting trees. If we could spend $1 million a year planting trees, I would. The challenge becomes, where do you plant trees? You run out of space. So we want to do as much as we can, where we can. What we want to focus on is looking at the total amount of green space we have in town, divide that up by square footage, and whatever that square footage is per person, how do we make it more? What some of the cities in Southeast Asia are doing is they're focusing on vertical green space. So where you're taking a wall that you may have nothing there and it's just maybe a stone retaining wall, can you put something green there and can you plant along that wall so that the total square footage in your community of what is green and what is planted is increased? We did a 46 tree apple orchard up at Endine. We'd love to do 10 of those. I don't have space to do 10 of them, so that's why it's as much as we can do where we can reasonably do them.
Yeah,
Trees, incidentally, are the #1 threat to electric utilities. #2 being squirrels, so we always run into that issue, but we want to plant as much as we can when we can. We don't want to be afraid to, I know nobody likes to cut down trees, but sometimes if you've got a couple of small little scrub trees in an area, can we remove them, do some landscaping and plant more and get a better, not just aesthetically better, but get a better mix. Not that we want to completely eradicate what's natural, but sometimes everyone says, well, these trees have been here forever. Well, no, they've been there for 40 years and it used to be this. I always point to the town common as an example. There used to be no trees in the town common. Now there's trees in the town common. That's fine, I prefer open grass, but we want to do as much as we can where we can do it.
I'd like to add to that. So when we did the municipal vulnerability training, the trainer, which was someone from our regional planning agency in Boston, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, they produced some posters to help educate people on what some of the impacts of climate change are. And there was one board that they brought in, and we have it down in the planning office, that showed where our hot spots are in town. Places that the temperature is higher than the surrounding area. And it's typically where you see more development, where there's more asphalt, more pavement, and more buildings. This area downtown was circled as one of the urban hotspots subject to the urban heat sink effect, and the other one was Route 1, the auto mile. And so I applied for a grant last year to try to address the urban heat sink effect by developing a program to plant trees along Route 1. And that would have the multiple benefits of trying to reduce that urban heat sink effect. It would provide shade and beauty to what is kind of an ugly urban corridor in places. Unfortunately, that grant application was not successful either, but we took a shot at it. Tony, you can be out in the town green with no trees, but on like last weekend, I'd like some shade.
I'm all for trees. I just wish we had a town common that was just grass, but not that I'm ever proposing we take down
Well,
the trees.
we got rules that you can't even play frisbee out there. So if it was open lawn, playing frisbee, we'd do it.
Yeah, we're being sustainable by not having the air conditioning on right now, so.
Yeah, for sure.
That, and I don't think any of us know how to turn it on, so that's a good sustainability message.
Do you have a timeline on some of this, all of this?
So we're,
Commission?
we have our next information session Tuesday. It's gonna be the same to this, it's just an open information session, same presentations. After that, I wanted to start taking letters of interest, and realistically, within a couple of weeks, we can get the initial group up and running, and then it's how quick it'll take them to go through developing a plan. And I don't wanna rush it, I'd rather a good product than a quick product, but, I mean, we could have the commission meeting by September, if not before.
I haven't seen what you've posted on the website, but are you providing some training to the members of the eventual?
We will. Early on, any new commission that has sort of a role like this, you're doing a lot more hand-holding, there's a lot more attending at the meetings, and we'll go through the normal stuff with the committee, the process for the open meeting law and agendas and all that stuff. We'll take care of that. My office and planning are gonna provide the staff support as we get going for the Sustainability Commission, and the DPW will be involved as well. We've had a successful intern program this summer. We'll look to replicate that next summer as well, and have some intern support for the commission as well. And Erin, while she's here, will also be getting some information for the commission. So we're not just gonna say, here you go off and meet and leave us alone and don't call us again. It's, which is one of the reasons I actually wanted to do this the last year. This is finally the time where I now have my office back up to fully staffed. Finance office is staffed, my HR office is staffed, so now I get the time to actually start focusing on some different initiatives.
So it'd be nice if it was available, the meetings on, Norwood Community Media.
Once the committee gets its regular schedule up and running, we can broadcast them. This meeting right now is being recorded and broadcast by NCM, so once they're available and ready to go, they can pick that time. We can work with NCM and make sure that they're broadcast and that they're
And there'll perhaps be an open forum as there is for the school committee for the public input.
I think that's critical to what the Sustainability Commission is going to do, and they're actually going to have to physically hold a lot of public forums, rather than just say, we've come up with this great idea, all right, somebody go do this. It's going to be invite that public comment in and have that public teasing process. I know when you do a plastic bag ban, one of the complaints everyone always has is, what are they going to do with the little trash bag in their bathroom? Because the whole world actually takes their little Shaw's bag and puts it in their bathroom trash barrel. The other one was, what about the little plastic bag that goes around my soup from the Chinese restaurant? So there's solutions to those things, but believe it or not, those are the questions that people have. So having those public forums, it's an important part of the process. I mean, we could write everything in 1 hour and order it to be done in the second hour, but we're a democracy. If you don't have that citizen involvement in what we do, nothing's going to go anywhere.
Be good.
Yeah.
Since you're fast tracking it so fast, I would think that it'd be a great idea to have a pool set nowadays.
It's not a bad idea.
They're almost sold out, or they are sold out, so you better rush.
I got some connections at the
Oh, you do?
department. I'm sure I can find them some space to make an extra table.
But that's 10,000, or Jerry Miller would say 20,000 people that are gonna be there.
That's a good idea. September 6th is Norwood Day. The buttons go on sale August 1st, incidentally. $3 if you get them in advance. Any other questions?
I have one more.
Yes, go ahead. That's what we're here for.
Someone asked me to ask this question. Will the town disband the Future Energy and Power Supply Needs Committee that's currently?
No, that committee hasn't been terribly active.
No, it hasn't, but that was a question.
Yeah, but that's sort of related to the light department's specific energy purchase portfolio. So it's really kind of I don't want to say they're different, but it hasn't come up in discussion that I don't think there'd be a need for disbanding it. At some point that work might get wrapped into here, but some of that was just we signed long-term energy purchase contracts and where we're going with that.
Okay.
Yeah, one more.
What about other types of disposable plastic like straws or plastic forks?
So those are things that the Sustainability Commission could always look into. There could be a good public outreach portion of their campaign. It could also, not everything necessarily needs to be sort of a town bylaw or something that town meeting votes on. It could be, hey, here's a program and we want to see if we can get voluntary compliance with restaurants, or here's how we could incentivize it. I know we're having a concert on Sunday, so everyone 6 o'clock on the Common. Natalie Jolly and the Reckless Hearts will be playing. It's a free cookout on the concert. Might as well get the plug-in while I'm here. But we're going to have the MWRA, which is the Mass Water Resources Authority's water truck here, and we actually have biodegradable plastic cups for the water truck. So, as an example, it was suggested to us, and we're looking into any way we can be sustainable. But so a commission also coming up with some of those ideas and having sort of the weight of the town behind it to sit down with restaurants and say, well, can this be a voluntary compliance? Did you know about this? What can we do to help you be a little bit more sustainable? All right, any other questions? Thank you everyone for being here. If you do have questions, feel free to just reach out to me or Paul Halkiotis. And this information is all also on the town's website, so it's right on the front page for the time being. So feel free to take a look. I hope you're interested in any questions or comments or concerns or thoughts or ideas. Just feel free to reach out to us. Thank you everyone.
Thank you.
And thanks NCM for filming.